Hi everyone, and as a follow-on to the tongue-in-cheek video that I posted last time about knowing lots of INFPs, I actually have only one person who I'm fairly certain or have a strong suspicion is an INFP in real life, and even with that person I'm not entirely sure. There's two other people that I've known in the past who may have been INFPs. I have some suspicions for reasons, but since I'm no longer in touch with those people, I have no way of confirming. But today I wanted to talk about ENFPs because they're a little bit easier to spot, and in my life I've been fortunate to have several people who hone to what I believe is the archetype of the ENFP, and these are in part people who are particularly successful or outstanding in leveraging their strengths of their cognitive functions, so everything kind of lines up, which makes them a good archetype to understanding type. And while I can't communicate what it's like interacting with them on an immediate basis, what I can say is that universally the three templates I have, they've all had big hearts. And of the three, the reason I bring up the ENFP today is because sadly we lost one of those. It was a friend's father who was a remarkable person in lots of ways. And please know, sorry for your loss, because it isn't my loss directly. It's someone who I've known for decades, kind of on and off, but indirectly we were not close necessarily, though he was highly influential in my earlier life. So this particular ENFP just showcases everything that one can think about with all of the many different things. As Older INFP Insights recently published in a video talking about polymaths, it is at least some of the elements of being a polymath. And that is, this man was a mechanical engineer by trade, and he was good at being a mechanical engineer, but also he loved to tinker with motors and automobiles and farm equipment. So he, when he was much younger, managed somehow to get hold of a campground when the town that we all grew up in was still fairly rural. And that former campground, he kept it open and converted what was a roller skating rink into a barn to hold his projects. And his projects included mostly cars. There was a Model A or Model T Ford. There was an old Saab from the 1950s or so. There was a 1970s era Pantera, if you know what that is. And a couple other vehicles. I've forgotten what was what there, but all of these personal projects on top of tinkering with tractors and all of the accoutrements that go with, mowers and haying and whatever other things one uses tractors to do. On top of all of that, he had one other car project, which was he had purchased a car from a European manufacturer that was in the US only very briefly before pulling back out of the country. And because of that, there were no mechanics around after a while that would still service this car, but he loved it. So he bought himself lifts and all of the tools and all the requirements and kept this car on the road for, it must have been a good 15 plus years, driving the absolute heck out of the thing, just because he enjoyed the mechanics of keeping something on the road and maintaining it. And if you looked at his garage, the tool collection was just an explosion of junk everywhere. But within that, he had some sort of a mental system in that giant mess of where things were and what he wanted to do next. So if all of that wasn't enough, he also built the house that the family lived in. And that, I say built kind of in a loose way because they never quite got around, or he never quite got around to completing everything. He brought in contractors for certain pieces like bricklaying and such, but the front porch was always kind of half finished. The rear staircase was still exposed wooden part. The bathroom upstairs was partly done. It was never quite fully furnished and complete, just one of many different projects. And in fact, he owned a couple of different properties. And when I was a kid, and between graduating from college and finding work, I got employed to do all sorts of tasks with some of the other properties to keep them up to date. Steam off wallpaper, paint floors, mow lawns. But that leads me to another piece of all of these pieces of the puzzle, that he also was big on community leadership. He was a figurehead in his religious organization, and he was also, on top of that, someone who would take in troubled kids if they needed a place to stay. Generally just kids that he knew, but he would end up taking in kids that needed a place, or he would, when we were adolescents, have the campground just open for us to play ourselves out and not get into any trouble. So when I was a teenager, I spent a good amount of time at the campground with the son and I, who are to this day still close. And we were up to all sorts of no good that was kept well away from anywhere where we could get into real trouble. So that's sort of a nutshell sketch of an ENFP and the many different directions that a life was taken in. And none of the threads were necessarily ever quite complete, but it was all a tapestry that somehow partially wove itself together. And so I wouldn't go so far as to say he was a polymath. He had just lots of interests, and all of them were always partly to mostly done, depending on what was the priority at the moment. I should also say, on top of all of this, he was also an environmental advocate, but very much in the pragmatic sense. He wasn't someone who was looking to do things in far-off lands or high concept. It was just don't do dumb stuff and try to preserve the wild spaces that we have, for example. And that's one example. I can bring into this a second ENFP who was another archetype, and this is a peer who I lost maybe about 10 years ago, 6 to 10 years ago. And again, no sorry for your loss. It was something that happened a long time ago, and it was as regrettable as it is history. And this particular ENFP, he was in the same area of consulting in a technology field that I am in. But prior to that, he was a monk, but not just a monk that would be in a far-off monastery. He was ministering to, it was an urban monastery that engaged with the people out in that society. And so a lot of what they were doing was working with the poor and homeless and engagement to try and help people in a very pragmatic way. So he did that for a while, and then somehow between here and there decided, I don't want to be a monk anymore, and moved on to becoming a technology consultant, because why not? He also, on top of everything, he loved to travel, and one of his other specialties was photography. In part, he would mix that with, he used to do hang gliding, and then he got into paragliding or parasailing. He did snorkeling before having some back issues. He was mountain biking and that sort of thing. But the photography piece fit into all of these areas because he would travel to various international places and then find the most rundown, areas of the city or the catacombs underneath Paris, and he would find places to take pictures of, say, old abandoned factories and make them look like natural caverns and grottos. And he'd find kind of the beauty in these abandoned spaces or decaying spaces and represent it in the photos that he took. Unfortunately, I don't think I have any photos left from the time that we knew each other, but it was just, again, one of the many different hobbies that he stitched together into some sort of a tapestry that made sense to him. And I can say from my end, from what I believe being an INFP, is like, I do not have that ability. That is, I have hobbies in different areas, maybe 4 or 5 different places where I go deeper. And there is a sort of cross-referencing of things, but by no means close to the many different areas of interests and the concept of being a polymath. It's just, I know some things about some things, and that's about as good as it's going to get for me. So anyway, the thing about ENFPs that I care about so much is that the archetypical ones I've known have had that childlike enthusiasm about pretty much anything. You engage them with ideas and they just will run with it in any direction that they can possibly go. And so I have a great respect myself for the ENFPs. Sometimes they will pick up a cause and hammer away at it, maybe too hard for other people's tastes. But I like seeing someone get behind a cause and really put their back into it with a true and sincerely held belief that they're making the world a better place. I wished I could do the same, but I am too, I don't know. I lack the energy, drive, or ability to be as forthright or as firm in establishing a position and being able to hold it compared to what I've seen ENFPs be able to do. So here I am, an evaluator that cannot get to the point of actually doing, whereas the ENFPs are the doers who perhaps are never quite able to complete everything to the extent that they may have wished. But anyway, just a meditation on the ENFPs who are a type that is dear to me. I still know those who are among them living, and am also grateful to have those among the people that I know. It's not a common type by any means, but I think it's just a little bit easier to detect than the introverted versions. And so when I find those people, I tend to sort of glom on a little more closely to observe them